we'll take care of your needs. Karen's situation, Veronica will take care of you. So we've got about, let's see, how many people do we have on right now? We have about half who signed up. We probably have a few people joining us. Let's look at the agenda before we dive in. We're going to do some polling to start off, which is exciting. So, first question for everyone, and you can vote. So now that the 3-year planning process is underway, where are you in the process? You can select 1, you haven't started. 2, you've started. 3, about halfway there. 4, almost there or completed. And 5, you've completed and you've come on the webinar to gloat in front of everybody. So let's give everybody a chance to vote. So Ryan, I hope you voted. I want to see that sticker on your jacket that I voted. Unless you're on the phone, which sometimes people are on the phone, and they do have a chance to, don't have a chance to interact with us. Okay. Has everybody voted? Anybody need more time? I mean, I think we're up to, almost 40 of us have voted or so, close to it, of the 57 people. Okay. So looking at the figures, a good third of us have not started, about 2/3 have started, and just a handful are halfway there, almost there. So today, let's look over the agenda, which will correspond kind of to the voting. Today's agenda will cover kind of a review of the guidance, review of the planning tool. Greg will go over the self-assessment tool, which will be excellent for you that are just starting. We'll also review some of the community needs data, but just briefly because we'll be having some webinars towards the end of the month on the more specifically on this. And then I'm really excited. Not that I'm not excited about Greg, because Greg's going to give us some real important stuff, and I'm excited about that. But the planning resource webpage, Selena will cover this tool that will allow you a kind of a simplified way of accessing the plethora of planning tools and resources that we have. And what Full Capacity Marketing has done is develop kind of a interactive web page where you click on things and it'll take you to some of the tools and resources they have. And so we want to showcase that today. So my part will be brief, and I will be turning it over to Greg, and then Greg will be turning it over to Selena. And I'll come back on at the end and just cover some of the upcoming webinars and workshops. And then reminding you about contacting TAP if you need additional assistance or consult related to planning. So let's do the second question before we get started, just to see what kind of tools or activities you have participated in. So let us know, have you participated in human-centered design? Did you attend the data tool, data dive training by Randy Tillery and company? Did you remember the asset mapping webinar that we did a few times this year? Are you reviewing best practice webinars that we've done for gathering best practice information? Have you reviewed the new planning guidance and template that we released just a few days ago? Are you meeting with partners, or is there some other type of activity you have participated in? So let's take a look where everybody's at. And so it looks like a lot of people did attend Randy's training, and people are meeting with partners. They have reviewed the template and the guidance, which is excellent. Yeah, we didn't. I don't think we have. Probably maybe, I want to say, a quarter to a third of the consortia is involved in human-centered design training. So I wouldn't expect a lot on that. The asset mapping we've done a couple of times over the last year, but it hasn't been done recently, and we're going to do it again in January, so that kind of bears out. And then best practices, you know, we don't have, I mean, maybe a third, less than half, but Selena will be showing us the tool that will kind of demystify how to find a lot of this information on the website. And of course, we know the majority of people have started meeting with partners, either through the WIOA planning process on the workforce side, or just your own planning process. And under other, Veronica, anything under other that was interesting, if you want to put that in the chat, or however you could voice over, either way. And Annabelle, there may be another round of human-centered design training in the spring. It'll depend on how we did this fall and depending on how the interest is for the spring. But we do have facilitators, so we're going to be taking a look at that probably in January. So stay tuned for that. And of course, Selena is waiting in the wings, so let's get started. And Veronica did say that regional gap analysis, held a one-day retreat, things like that were showing up in other, kind of looking at your data. Interesting. Okay. So hopefully this was enlightening. It was for me. And let's move on, because I'm dying to get our guests in here. So just quickly over the purpose. The planning process is based on Education Code 84906 that appeared in the AB 104 legislation. That's kind of our roadmap for the planning as far as what items are covered in the template. And so we're basing it all on that. Still using the requirements part of the last 3-year effort, so there should be no surprise if you participated in that process. But the add-on is the state is providing better tools and more technical assistance. So, and then the changes are the trailer bill gave us an extra year of planning, so that's allowed us to have these webinars, develop these tools, develop the resource page, have a lot more dialogue on that, things like that. And then so the 3-year plans will be submitted June 7th, and we'll go over that in the planning guidance, and they'll be uploaded and certified in NOVA by all members. So your members have to certify, and then it's submitted by the consortia once it's all certified. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to mute myself and bring Greg in. Veronica, I think I can hear you typing, so if you want to mute you, we'll bring Greg in. So Greg, have at it.
Thanks, Neil. I hope everybody can hear me okay. It's great to be on with everyone. Welcome. Let's see here. So we do have a lot to cover, so I'm going to try to move through very quickly. You know, keep in mind, of course, this is recorded, and so you can access it later, and all the materials are also already available for you. Feel free to ask questions in the chat, and I'll pause that, you know, intermittently to provide some responses where I can. Okay, so this is a sort of high-level view of the 3-year plan guidelines. First things first, they are available online, and again, they're available as part of the PowerPoint and handout resources here. So you don't need to click away and start looking for them right now. There's also a slide that shows you where they are on the site currently for later. But ultimately, your 3-year plan has really 4 sections, right? Plus an executive summary. And we'll go over those in a minute. There are 3 required tables. One of them is a regional service providers table, where you identify who's providing services, the types of services that they provide, and by program area, and et cetera. You are asked to set progress indicators for the next 3 years, and there's also a table where you identify sources of funding. Additionally, everyone has been asked to create a logic model. If you don't know what a logic model is, don't fret. We are going to have some webinars on that, and there are a plethora of resources out there on how to develop them. So David is saying that voice keeps fading in and out. Is that me? Okay, got it. I will try to do just that. Hang on one second. Let me try something.
Okay, is that any better? Excellent. Okay, beautiful. So, moving forward, logic model. We'll go over that in just a bit. Thank you all. The narrative is limited to 35 pages, single space. That doesn't mean you have to turn in a single spaced report. It was just a way to communicate the length. That or 21,000 words. This is not a recommendation. It's just a limitation. We're in order to be able to actually read these plans, they really need to be at a reasonable length, and so that's where we got this page limit. Again, they don't need to be 35 pages; they just can be, and that would include only the narrative portions. That wouldn't include your front or back matter. Okay. So let's see here. And then, of course, final plans will be submitted in Word and PDF formats no later than June 7th, just as an FYI. The MS Word version doesn't need to have all the attachments. It's really just the narrative, and we're asking you to do that so that we can better break out the sort of various sections for review. Okay, so as I mentioned, there are 4 sections, and these sections are really organized around planning phases that we feel are pretty important, or actually pretty standard, really, for projects like these. There's a pre-planning assessment, which is to say you're going to take a look at the quality of service, what you've done well, what you think you can probably improve upon, based on your goals for the last 3-year planning cycle. Consider the extent to which you've really been able to collaborate and collaborate effectively with your partners over that process, etc. That would be followed by community needs and customers analysis. So this would be really working to understand what the needs of your community what the needs of your community are, who are your customers, as well as really trying to align with the regional labor market opportunities that your area affords. Once that's done, third section is on identifying goals and strategies. So this is really the meat of your plan, where you outline your overarching approach for the next 3 years. And then lastly, the fourth section is on piloting and implementation, which is where you would drill down into the nitty-gritty around basically what types of activities do you anticipate prototyping or piloting, in sort of identifying how you intend to sort of evaluate the effectiveness of those initiatives, so on and so forth. I see a lot of chat, but it seems like it may be okay. So I will keep moving. Okay, cool. Okay. So I'm going to fly right past these. So please don't panic. All of this information is in the guidance. For these next 4 slides, it really just, we outline what the goals are, right? As well as some guiding questions. I'm not going to go over the guiding questions, and I'm going to leave it to you to go through these on your own, just because we have so much to get through. But I do want to pause and just say, okay, just we were saying pre-planning. It's really about figuring out how assessing your success heretofore, figuring out where your strengths and weaknesses are, and trying to really kind of align yourself with new opportunities available within your region, such as WIOA, strong workforce, so on and so forth. Community needs and customers is something that many of you work to assess all the time. This really just is intended to give you an opportunity to collaborate, and I think really not exactly benchmark, but certainly I guess formalize some shared understanding of what the needs are, and then from the student perspective, and of course, let's not forget that part of your customer base, as it were, are your regional employers, and so engaging with them is going to be an important aspect of this. Identifying goals and strategies. Notice here, one thing I do want to point out is, for all of you who participated in the AB 86 planning process, which for you newbies is the process that preceded AB 104, where agencies in conjunction with regional partners submitted plans for how they might work together to meet regional needs. In AB 86, there were some core objectives. Many of you remember them. Transition, so basically plans to, or strategies to facilitate transitions into the workforce or into post-secondary study, plans to improve integration, right? And that would be both from the student perspective, in other words, like seamless pathways, from across segments, but also integration of services from an operational perspective, basically trying to get away from that traditional kind of siloed model that many schools tend to work within, so on and so forth. So this is where you would really want to sort of try to leverage some of those activities. Look to that language for ways you might be able to develop some really robust plans, etc. And of course, I don't think I have to remind you that your plans, can only be, you must address only those program areas that AEP funding that are allowable under AEP guidelines. If you don't know what those are, if you have any questions about how those are defined, please reach out. And it's okay if you do have questions. It's not uncommon. We'll be happy to provide some clarification on that. And then lastly, of course, the piloting implementation piece. For all of you who have participated in the human-centered design training, this should be very familiar to you. If you haven't, I would recommend, seeking out those opportunities. Don't worry, it's not that there's any secret knowledge that you don't have. It's simply that human-centered design training is really focused on rapid prototyping, learning from, formative exercises, and adapting to student needs rapidly. And so it just helps, better equip you to be able to develop really strong and compelling prototype options. Okay, so now, yes, and it is fun to collaborate through it. Sudhi and I went through it. Thank you, Sudhi. Okay, planning guidance and templates. So I have this little slide here that helps to identify the documents visually. So the 3-year planning guidance you should have down here, and I'll put it up on screen in a sec. I am downloading it. Forgive me. Okay, and then the plan template is really kind of like 5 templates, although they're all in the same document. There are a couple things I want to go over related to how to use the template. and I'll try to go through them quickly. But first things first, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to make sure I do this the way that Veronica taught me. There we go. Et voila. Okay, so this is the 3-year planning guidance. It has all the information you need in order to complete the plan. Provides data on forming submission objectives. So remember when I mentioned the objectives from AB 86, they're all here in some form or another, as well as the outcomes that are expected and the program areas. The plan guidelines themselves provide concrete directions. So in this section, you will do these things, right? In addition, some helpful planning conversations, questions, training, so on and so forth, and some questions that you can ask to help drive some of the planning efforts. And finally, resources and tools that you could potentially utilize in your conversations and in your development. It was developed in conjunction with quite a few folks from the field, and so we're hoping that this is going to be easy to use and not terribly complicated. You are required, just as an FYI, you are required to address every single section, and you do need to do so in order. We have provided a template for you to use. There isn't really a requirement that you use that template, with the exception that the tables that are included, as well as the logic model, those are absolutely requirements. So those need to be submitted with your plan. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing this because you can go through that on your own and transition to the template itself. But first, I'm just going to take a look and see if there are any questions. Beautiful. Okay. Nothing yet. Let me just pause. There it is. Huh. Sorry, y'all. This is what happens when you try to use Microsoft Word on a Mac. Okay. All right. So we provided a template, and the first page describes how you can unlock it. So in order to, like I said, help facilitate review, it is a true to form template in that there are form fields that you can use to complete your plan, and because they're form fields, we can automate some of the processing. Also, by organizing the template the way that we have it, provides you with a pretty clean a plan that you could conceivably, with very little futzing, make publicly available and would look polished, right? Sorry. And so I'll leave you to review that whenever seems best. But basically, wherever the fields are, wherever there's this gray area, if you type on it, these are the fields, right? Built-in table of contents, etc. What I'm going to do is kind of quickly scan through the narrative areas because they're really simple. You just copy and paste your text, and you will. Hold on. Okay, there we go. Chrissy is asking about the developer tab, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But okay, yeah, you'll just copy and paste whatever narrative you have. We love the idea of you providing tables and charts and graphs. In its locked format, it won't let you do that, and so that's why we provided the instructions on how to unlock it. If you don't have the developer tab on your Microsoft Word, there are instructions on the first page on how to enable it. There is no password. If you're prompted for one, ignore it. Don't make one up either, because if you do and you forget it, there's no way to really unlock it. So anyway, the one recommendation we have is, if you plan to use this template and do unlock it, unlock it, great, do whatever you need to do, and then lock it back up. It'll actually just help prevent errors from occurring and, just keep things clean. Okay, so narrative section, scanning. Okay, so the three tables. Table 1, regional service providers. Here you need to really identify all of the providers, all of the agencies that are providing educational and training services to your adult student population, right? And by that I mean, the population's benefiting from adult education programs and services. These do not need to be, in fact, shouldn't be limited by whether or not they receive funding from AEP. It's really intended to basically get everyone to really do a regional scan and identify who their partners and potential partners are. As you're doing this, in fact, I would say that a good practice would be to use this as a starting place, but really to expand upon it. So all you need to do here is identify program areas and then provide some description if that's valuable. But ultimately, you really should be identifying not just program areas, but levels, but the sort of levels and types of services, right? So, ABE high, low, ASE high, low, ESL 1, 2, 3, things like that. It's a bit too cumbersome to produce for a state report, but you should at least factor that into your planning. And whatever you do, in the end, you want to make sure that it aligns itself to this reporting table. So that's one. Second, funding. So funding for adult education programs and services. So this is where you would identify anticipated funding, so funding estimates for the next 3 years from AEP, CalWORKs, a few of the sort of standard sources, and then you'd also include any others that you'd be receiving funding from. So if you're doing WE-001 and it's serving adults, you'd put that in there. If you have fee-based programs, or if you are receiving funding from another discrete source, you would list that here. In its current form, any numbers you put in will calculate automatically. Again, you can unlock it and just take the table and put it in Excel if that's easier. It really makes no difference. We only need one of these for your consortium, but in your shoes, I would probably recommend working with each of your agencies and partners to develop at least one of these each, just so that you can make sure that everybody's putting all their cards on the table, and you're able to have open and honest conversations, right, about what funds are available and how it is that they can best be leveraged to serve the needs of the student population. Skipping down. Next, we have our logic model. A logic model is really just a visual way of organizing, how it is that what you intend to do, what you need to do it, and how you anticipate, how you anticipate the activities and outcomes might, yield the specific, the activities and outputs might yield the specific outcomes that you're hoping to see within your region. And again, we're going to talk about this in greater depth, I think, on the 30th or thereabouts. But the short version for how to understand this is basically, you've got your input. So what do you need? Teachers, resources, the concrete things that you need in order to realize your vision for the next 3 years. What will your core activities be? And again, they don't have to be every single activity that you're doing, but the ones, but should be communicated at a high enough level to be able to track your progress and to ensure that the logic from left to right, is solid. Outputs and are the results of those activities. I would, these are where I'd put a lot of pressure. Outcomes often take several years to realize. Outcomes often take several years to realize, And as you can see, we have immediate or short-term outcomes, what you're going to see next year, intermediate, what you might see in the next 1 to 3 years, and then long-term, what you might see in 3 to 5. It's not uncommon to collapse some of these, and if needed, that's okay. You can do that. But the long and short of it really is we know that your long-term outcomes, right, need to be focused around the outcomes identified by the AB 104 legislation, right? So this would be increased wages, improved transitions, things like that. And so what the logic model helps you do is identify precisely how you might get there. And just stepping back to outputs again reflect the sort of specific concrete results of activities. So for example, if one of your activities is going to be to expand programs and services to an area of your region that has historically not had any service providers, right? Well, your outputs would be things like, increased enrollment, right? Or, things like that, right? So it's really concrete stuff that you can really use as a benchmark for whether you're making progress toward your end goals. And then assumptions and external factors are pretty self-explanatory, but simply put, assumptions are conditions under which the assumptions you're making about the conditions under which you'll be implementing the plan, and then external factors really have more to do with risk. So are there factors that could potentially external from this external to your immediate context that could impact your ability to meet to actually achieve your goals for this 3-year cycle. And before I move off of it, one thing I did want to point out is it does ask for a primary goal statement. There are some pretty well established approaches to developing goal statements, and like I said, we'll talk about that in greater detail in the logic modeling webinar. But my recommendation is to make this as concrete as possible and to have it really reflect your vision, a true shared vision, but also to make sure that it's concrete, and is basically can be a touchstone for the work that you'll be doing for the next 3 years. So I'm going to pause quickly because I know that there were some questions.
So Greg, sorry to interrupt. There's two types of questions. There's one from Chrissy where she says, where is the developer tab? And then there's a couple of questions on the table for programs and services. So if you want to take care of Chrissy's question.
Sorry, I'm pausing because I'm having some audio trouble. All right, so I'm looking, there's no box to check for workforce programs like work-based learning. I'm really glad that you mentioned that. So in the template, where that would go, so these are the programs that are required by AB 104. So, and we split up ABE and ASE because they are two different programs, right? And if you provide services in ABE and ASE respectively, then you know that. If you don't, then that's going to be very confusing to you, in which case you're probably providing ASE. It depends. I would work with my adult school partners to figure out what the difference is, but they are truly two different populations. ESL, CTE, career technical ed, of course. Adults, AWD is adults with disabilities. So this is really programs for adults with disabilities or populations, who are intended to participate in specific types of programs. Workforce readiness, PA is pre-apprenticeship, and ACS is adults training for child school success. And so, to your question about yeah, exactly. What about workforce programs like work-based learning, et cetera? You would want to do either CTE if it's a robust program, or workforce readiness if it's a supplementary one. That would be my immediate recommendation. And then, that the description of services is there for you to clarify anything that needs clarification. Remember, it's less it's important for us to get this information, for the state to get it, just so that it can have a full and complete picture of the resources that are being mobilized. But in the end, this is really meant to be a tool for you to better identify opportunities for alignment and collaboration, right? So, one thing that we really don't want to have happen, and this is both for you and for all of us involved in, developing these templates and reviewing them, is for you to worry too much about, like how a thing should be checked, right? It's not like if you check the wrong thing, Neil's going to show up at your door, right? It's just, but to do your best and consider the real context, which again is to help you with your planning. Okay. Scanning quickly. There we go. Jessica. Oh, hey, Jessica, what's happening? Jessica has asked a wonderful question, as she is often wont to do. Let's see, but I just lost it. It had to do with the indicators. So putting this back large again. All right, so once your logic model is done, and well, not even once it's done, you could work in tandem or you could go backwards, but you have been asked to provide 3 to 5 core SMART objectives, right? So these are, again, progress indicators that you will use to identify progress over the next 3 years. We have an example here. By May 2019, increase the number of agencies that have aligned CTE pathways and developed comprehensive program maps from 2 to 10, whatever, right? You can use it if you want. It really makes no difference. But ultimately, what you should take away from it is that A, it's time bound, right? B, it has an action that is understandable, it's attainable, it's concrete, and it's measurable, right? So it's not just, we really don't want these to be fluff. This should be something that, as you move through each year, you're able to say, yes, we're on track, no, we're not. These must map, and we're not going to be cross-referencing, but if they don't map, then then there's probably an issue there. But they should really map to your logic model activities, outputs, and/or outcomes. Most of these would probably be would fall under your outputs, right? Anyway, but not necessarily. But it just depends on the size of your consortium, how you define what your deliverables are. But it should be really clear, both in the logic model. It should be actually really clear in the logic model, basically, what your core indicators are going to be. And so when you actually put them in here, it should be kind of a no-brainer. All right. And then the rest is narrative.
So Greg,
all right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Really quick before you move on, Sudi did put the developer tab.
I'm taking a look at some of the questions here, and I'm going to turn off screen sharing for just a second.
Hello?
Okay. So we have logic model seems to be just part of section 2.4. How do the key indicators relate to the logic model's goal statement? Brilliant question. I hope I answered that. Yeah, they should follow directly from all of those. Ryan, on the logic model, where is it from and do you have samples? Okay, there are lots of examples of logic models out there. I'm sure many of you have already just Googled them in the meantime. The one that we're using is a pretty standard format. There are others. If you are absolutely hell-bent on using a different one, then reach out. I'm sure there's some flexibility, but I would be hard-pressed to know why right? You'd want to use a different one. But there are, yeah, absolutely. We can provide some samples. Sorry, I'm just adjusting something. Yeah, we can provide some samples, sample completed ones. I mean, they may not be for, yeah, they'll map in varying degrees to the work that you need to do, but absolutely, we can get you some. All right. I just need to do one other little thing. And so I feel, all right. Almost done. Okay, so good, good. Okay, so then the last thing, let me go back to the PowerPoint, and I want to make sure that Selena has time. So okay, the self-assessment tool. I will take 2 minutes on this and explain it. So the self-assessment tool is just that. Many of us participated, in fact, many of you participated in some working groups, field team process. The field team, the member effectiveness, consortium member effectiveness field team. I participated in that, so did actually Sudhi and Neil. And this tool came out of the work of that group. It is a formative tool to that you can use to identify where you may have strengths or weaknesses. There are instructions on how it can be used. It just as an FYI, it really has not been scaled to be, for use as a punitive measure, so I would use it cautiously. It's really meant to sort of help drive some conversations around where you might be able to improve. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. When I'm full screen, I can't see any of this chat, and there was something really weird going on with my audio. So. If somebody else was talking, I did not hear it whatsoever. Okay, I'm going to leave folks to, look at that on their own, and we'll have a webinar on that as well. And then lastly, community needs data. So this is just some, regional data that we pulled together to help with your planning. There are additional resources that you've already been given access to if you participated in Randy's trainings. There are additional resources later coming down the pike to help you as well that will help expand on some of the information here. I'm actually going to try to upload the document now, or sorry, not the document, but the workbook. And so it should be there now. Yeah. And so there's a tab for each consortium. And basically, I would ask you to zoom in. We just wanted to provide some cross tabs of some core indicators related to the populations who are generally comprise the adult school or adult learners, the adult ed populations, or adult ed populations. I don't want to take up any more time, and so I'm available to answer any questions either through the chat or independently. If additionally you would like to see different cuts. Oh, John, thank you. Good question. So the data is actually from PUMS data, and what PUMS is a public use microdata sample. It is from the American Community Survey 2016, 2012 5-year, and what PUMS data is it is a comprehensive sample of the full survey, which has been weighted in a number of different ways to allow users, advanced users, to develop estimates of their own and also calculate confidence intervals and margins of error. The data provided here was calculated with a 90% confidence interval. And so whatever numbers you see, you want to just basically take it could be plus or minus 10% of the total population, and that would be the total in that column, rather in the row, in the total column for a given row. In terms of the boundaries themselves, and this was difficult, we started with the community college district boundaries, and then manually adjusted them to conform to AEBG boundaries. Where possible, we tried to kind of push unorthodox lines into lines that were a little bit more common. So, for example, I want to say West Kern is like strictly speaking, the area is a little bit larger than what would show up on the AEBG map or the AEP map, just because it didn't make a whole lot of sense to not include, say, one of the secondary school districts, right? And so one of the things that we actually want to provide in the next coming weeks are some shape files, as well as potentially some shapefiles, as well as a potentially interactive map that will allow you to sort of do some investigation on your own. And we'll likely be reaching out to see if we can get some folks who might want to help with reviewing some of that. We actually have some prototypes available, so we're ready to go whenever you are. Okay, now we're gonna probably end up going over, and so I'm gonna stop right now and hope that Selena doesn't kill me. So, any other questions from me? Please feel free to pop them in the chat. And now I'm gonna turn it over to Selena.
Oh, I would never kill you, Greg. That was fantastic data. Hi, everybody. How are you? It's Selena Shands, and we're just very happy to be here and share some really cool things around all of this kind of planning information. And right about now, you're probably feeling like this with all the information, but you can do it. You know you've done it before. You can do it again. The great news is we've got we really took a hard look at all of the resources that were out there and how could we align them in a way that you could have quick access and really help you through this planning process. So that's really what our section is today. So we're going to spend about 3 or 4 minutes just sort of going over everything. The tool is going to be online. It's going to be an online tool, and it will be launched, we're thinking early next week. So we'll get a communication out to the field on that. The good news is that wherever you are in the process, like about 65% of you said that you have started the planning, about another 30%, 28% have not. So everybody's kind of at different places. And so what we've really done with this is we did a crosswalk from those 4 kind of categories of the plan that Greg was alluding to earlier. So if you look at your plan, you'll see 2.2 to 2.5. So around the pre-planning assessment, community need, goals and strategies, and then, of course, implementation. And we did a deep dive and said, okay, what are all the tools out there that would align and crosswalk to each of those sections? And then how could we compile all of that so that you not only know what the tool is, but how to use it with that section and why you might want to take a look at it. So even those 5 and 3% of you that were almost done or halfway through, there may be some really good things in here that you want to use for fine-tuning the plan. I love the fact that so many of you have taken about 65%, I believe in the poll, have taken all the webinars and things on data with WestEd, and that's really a key component of this, obviously, to create plans and strategies that are market responsive to the needs within your community. So with that, let me just take you over here, and then Christy Fairfax is on our team and has been helping us with kind of all the planning tools and working with our design team to really make it easy for you. So Christy, you want to go over these next couple of slides and just tell them maybe the categories and how it's going to work?
Sure. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, sound great.
Okay, great. Okay, so the tool, it's a very simple tool. We thought the simpler the better. So what we did is we organized, well, everything will be automatically listed alphabetically, but then we want you to be able to sort through and pick and choose what you want to view. So you can either filter by planning section, so that's those planning sections 2.2 through 2.5 that Greg and Selena discussed, and then also by resource type. So some of the planning sections had crossover as far as what their needs were. So if you want to look at economic data, you can look there under resource type, or if you want to see what types of adult education program training there is in general, you can look by that for resource type. And then you can also, of course, filter by both. So you can say, I want to see what kind of training is available that corresponds to, say, the goals and implementation section, those types of things. So it's very simple. You can just sort there and refine your search. And then, as Selena talked about, we have a description and how to use it, as well as the, of course, the direct link to the tool that. Oh, can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. So that you can, have the brief description and then how to use it, and then you should be able to access it, and that's all there is to it.
Perfect. So again, very simple descriptions, suggestions, and we're going to keep building on this as well. So it will not just be, one time, one and done, as we say. It's going to continue to build on that. So we look forward to your input, and as you're going through it, and if you see things that are not in there that you're looking for, then just let us know, and we'll make sure that we get them up there. The other thing, too, that we're working on, a couple of things, because data is so important, we're going to create a data resource toolkit. It's kind of like a one-stop shop for everything around student data, fiscal and economic data. Same types of sortable elements here, what the resource is, a description, why you might want to think about it, how you might apply it. And then because sometimes we have turnover, obviously, in our world, just like any industry, we're developing an online onboarding toolkit. So this takes someone that would be brand new coming in, and even a good refresher for those of you who've been around a while, but it's a guide, it's kind of a web-based tool for your consortium staff and members. So we start out with, well, what is AEBG? What's our mission? What needle are we trying to move? And it takes you through all different types of our, really, categories of our stories. So in that onboarding toolkit, we'll have things like web tutorials, some to-do lists, some essential resources and lists, and things of that nature. A lot of times it's tough. You have even partners coming on board, and you really want to give them, hey, this is really what we're doing. So these kind of tools will be helpful for you as you're working to build an outstanding consortium. So I'll stop there, see if there's any questions, and then also turn it back over to Neil.
All right, thanks, Selena. Real good stuff. I can't wait for the launch next week, and we'll keep everybody posted. And then, Selena, any idea on the other toolkits that are coming out? What are we looking at as far as onboarding and data resource? Any projections on when those could be released?
That's a good question, Neil. My sense would be, let's see, we're in November. The Data Resource Toolkit is actually an extension of what we're doing now. I think that's next up, and the onboarding is going to take a little bit longer. So I would say by early January, we'll be looking to do the onboarding toolkit, and then the Data Resource will probably be the next up. Rolling out there, but we'll definitely keep you guys updated in the e-news and those types of things. And I'd love to get people's input, just to, if you're having sticking points on anything, whether it's the 3-year planning, data in particular, or even onboarding your teams, because those are really the 3 toolkits. If you have suggestions, go ahead and put them in the pod and let us know kind of where the sticking points are, and we'll make sure to gather those resources and crosswalk them accordingly so you can search for them, as Christy was pointing out.
Okay, great. That sounds fantastic. And we'll be repeating some of these webinars, like community asset mapping and the community needs data as well as the guidance and the self-assessment, things that Greg was going over. We'll do a mini webinar series in January. So when these tools come on board next month, you'll also have the ability to listen to another round of webinars. If you're still having trouble getting that jump start, we'll have that last push in January to get everybody moving forward, and we'll also have the release next week of the planning page. So lots of good stuff going on. Thank you, Selena. Okay. And Greg, I think we did have a couple of questions that we wanted to get back to. There was one from Ryan that asked if the table for the, let's see, yeah, the table for the service providers, is that for outside agencies or do we include members? And I'm assuming that we're including all members there, but if you want to give a little more detail on that.
Well, I guess that's a good question. In truth, I guess originally we were thinking about it as for agencies other than members, but really, yeah, I mean, there's not a reason not to include them, and so unless there's like a particular reason you might want to keep them separate, I would say yeah, include them.
Great. And then we did have a clarification. Chrissy wanted to understand the developer tab, and Sudie put the link in there. Is there anything else you wanted to explain about that accessing the developer tab that might be important, Greg?
Sure. I mean, really, the instructions that are provided in the template really do a good job of explaining how to enable it. It takes a minute, but once it's enabled, it's always there, and you can easily toggle between having the thing locked or not having it locked. If you're really having trouble with it, just reach out and I'll be glad to talk you through how to enable it, or just give you an unlocked version. That's really all there is to it.
Okay, thank you, Greg. I'm gonna, let's see, is that our last slide, Veronica, or is there, let me see, let me go back maybe. I think we have yeah, here we go. So, and Christy did find it. She said you had to go to the option bar under File tab to enable it. That was the missing piece. So if you do have any follow-up questions or suggestions, like Greg and Selena suggested, you can always email TAP, and Veronica put the email address in, and they can get that to Selena or to Greg, depending on the question. Or if you have a way of contacting them directly, you can do that as well. But you can always use TAP as our central focus for getting suggestions, questions, anything else through to our experts. And Peggy asked the question of when the next webinars or workshops would be. So here's kind of a snapshot of the planning-related stuff. We have, actually, Randy Tillery has 2 Regional Data Unlocked workshops coming up this month. These are the last 2. There's one in San Diego on November 15th, one in Anaheim on November 29th, and then in between that, Greg will be doing a self-assessment webinar on the 28th, and then Greg will also be doing a logic modeling webinar. That's on Friday, I believe, on November 30th. And then in January, we're looking at maybe the 2nd to the 4th week doing a mini-series of webinars to cover these same topics and also include asset mapping, having CalPro and AIR come in, cover the asset mapping, as well as Greg doing self-assessment and the logic model again. And so that'll be our last push in January to get everything done by the June 7th submission date. You can also contact TAP if you need a planning consult. They do have a few ex-administrators under contract that are available to provide you consultation services. So you can always contact TAP and set that up. So we have a lot of things available. Also in January, we will be looking again at the human-centered design training to see if anybody else is interested. You can always email TAP, and they can relay that to the human-centered design people as far as scheduling for January. The only thing with that, we'd have to start pretty early because, I don't know, Greg or Sudi, how long does that human-centered design process take? And if we do it in January, will that give them enough time for a June 7th submission? I'll just throw that out.
It'd be pretty close. I mean, it'd be like it's 8 weeks, though one could complete the training sooner. You know, I don't know if it'd be an either or. You know, even if it runs parallel, I think it's a good. It actually would really, I think, work nicely. Simply because the human-centered design training really is intended for teams working on a specific project, and so I think that would work fine. Unfortunately, I just don't know when the next cycle starts up. But I did want to add one other thing related to that. That the webinar series planned for January is actually going to be a collaboration between WestEd, AAR, CalPro. All of us are really getting together to present like a series that would take folks from soup to nuts on really how to develop a 3-year plan, right? And so if you have no idea how to begin, or you know, feel like you're making good progress but are getting stymied at different points, this is really where you'd really want to make sure that you get these on your calendar and really work to participate. It'll be the first really thoroughly sort of comprehensive series that I think we've presented on strategic planning. So we're really, really excited about it.
Great. And we'll open those webinars on the 28th and 30th probably sometime next week. And so look for those posting. We'll put something in the newsletter announcing those are available for signups. And Alan had asked a question about guidance and templates are final. And so we did send an email out to directors and leads and co-chairs, I think a few days ago. And Veronica, if you can put the link to where we posted that letter, and members as well. Alan consults with some of the consortia, so he might not have been on that list. So if you can put the link to where the final guidance and the template are located, then people like Alan could access that through the website. That would be great. There you go. Thank you. So any additional questions? We still have plenty of time. And you can go to the website as it's posted here. Oh, and it's right there. Okay, great. So that's where you would find the self-assessment, the template, and the guidance. If you look at the small print there, that's where it's located on the website. Thank you for doing that, Veronica. Oh, okay, and it's in the bottom left-hand corner in the chat. What is it called? A pod? Chat pod or resource pod? That's it. Sorry. Okay. Let's see. Any questions for Selena? Any questions for Greg? We have extra time. Otherwise, we can wait till the end of the month for the webinar series, or you can contact TAP if you have follow-up questions, or you can review all the great resources provided today and look for the announcement for the resource page and give it a trial test or go through it, and then check back in with us at the end of the month and go through some of Greg's webinars. And then if that doesn't work, you can hang in there till January and go through the mini-series. And if that doesn't work, then you might as well hang it up. But no, just kidding. But we will give you plenty of opportunity and plenty of access to training. So, and then as Veronica said, or you can contact TAP for a planning consult, you know, break glass, pull the emergency lever, contact TAP, get a free planning consultation, and off you go. All right, so Greg and Selena, any last comments before we turn it over to Veronica?
I mean, for me, honestly, no. If there's anything that you might need help with or just need help understanding, we really want to provide you with the resources that are going to be most helpful to you. And so please reach out. Do absolutely email TAP, but feel free to CC me on anything related to the template or the community needs data. In fact, I would love to hear, from any or all of you about some of the data cuts that you'd really be interested in. And again, if you're willing to participate in in kind of a quick little pilot on an interactive map that I think we're really hoping to be really valuable, that would be good to know too. So Excelsior, and we're really looking forward to seeing this process be successful. So.
And this is Christy. Selena had to hop off, but as she mentioned, if you have any suggestions or feedback on any of the tools or suggestions for the upcoming tools, the onboarding and data tool, definitely submit those to TAP, and we'll be able to take those into consideration as we're developing all of that.
All right, thank you, Christy. Thank you, Greg. Thank you to Selena, and we'll turn it over to Veronica. Thanks, Veronica, for troubleshooting behind the scenes, and please stay tuned for some instructions from Veronica. We look forward to talking to you in the future, and happy planning.
Yes, everyone, thank you very much for your participation, and thank you to all of the presenters for the value of information that was received this afternoon. We do have an upcoming webinar next week that will be focused on career pathways, and that's with Judy Mortrud. She'll actually be here in our studio presenting with us. So if you have not registered for that webinar, please be sure to do so. And I will post the URL where you can register. That will be next Wednesday beginning at 12 p.m. That's a great webinar that could assist you as well during your 3-year planning process. I will close the webinar now, and when I do, the evaluation will appear. Please be sure to fill out this evaluation and let Christy, Neil, Greg, as well as Selena know what you thought about today's webinar, and then also if there are any other additional support requests or professional development that you need at this time to assist you in the 3-year planning process or any other professional development endeavors you have. Thank you all very much and have a great weekend.